Well, hey there everybody, this is Snack Box coming to you from just a gorgeous day here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm here to talk to you about one of my most requested topics. We're talking about food storage on a through hike. I'll tell you what, if there is one thing more important than snacks, and there's really not, but if there were one thing more important than snacks, it's going to be protecting those snacks and keeping them out of the mouths of animals and creatures. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about food storage options. We've got a little bit of everything today. We've got food, drugs, sex, violent, controversy. We actually just have snacks and controversy, so let's talk a little bit about this. We got a lot to cover, not a lot of time. Let's get to it. Let's talk about snacks, baby. Let's talk about you and me. So if you're planning a long hike, a through hike of some sort, maybe an extended trip, or maybe even just a trip into, say, the Sierra Nevada where bear canisters are required, then you're gonna wanna know a little bit about bear canisters and other food storage. If you're planning a trip, say, of the Appalachian Trail, or maybe you're gonna go out and do the Colorado Trail, like many of the people who are watching this channel sort of found me through Colorado Trail videos, or if you're planning to do the PCT, something of the sort, then you need to consider some different options for food storage. So one of the most common options is a bear canister, which we have here. We're going to talk a lot about this guy today. And then another option is just to get a bag for doing what they call counterbalanced hanging, that sort of thing. This is just a waterproof bag. This is a big one too. I've kept up to 10 days of food in this guy. It's waterproof. It's got a nice little buckle on it, and you can tie a string to it and then counterbalance it to keep it out of bears' mouths. And this is typically a really good option for just about anything that you're going to do in the backcountry. And then this one has its uses for sure that are a little bit different than what you'd find for this, and some of the different areas where these aren't allowed, these are required. And then we also have a notable omission in the Ursack. So Ursack is a company that's coming on, and they're starting to make sort of Kevlar, I believe, bags that you can tie to trees and bears can't get your food inside of them. And we need to talk about why that's not included in this list of options, and why I think that even if you're going to go with an Ursack, then some of the traditional wisdom still applies. So let's talk first about that Ursack actually. So here's the deal with Ursack is that I know just a little bit, and what I know about the Ursack I learned from a park ranger when I was doing the John Muir Trail, and I learned this from a park ranger in Kings Canyon National Park, which is really bear heavy. If you've ever been to Kings Canyon, I've never been to Kings Canyon and not seen a bear. In fact, I chased a bear out of camp on the John Muir Trail in Kings Canyon, and it was maybe 5 or 6 feet from me. So there are certainly bears present and bears that are familiar with food. So I trust this ranger to have been giving me the straight story. So what the ranger told me is that the Ursack has little holes in it. So while it will protect the food from being stolen by the bear and the bear actually eating it, that when the bear bites into the Ursack to try to test it and see if they can pull it off of the tree, that the food particles still sort of disperse and they still taste it, which gives them that reward of food. So even though it will protect your food in the short run, ultimately what she said is the research shows that it will continue to help the bears become acclimated to human contact. This is obviously not ideal. This is what leads to human-bear interactions. It also is what leads to park rangers having to put bears down. And that's not great, obviously. This also is a really big deal because if you know, there are some places where you have to have a bear canister and Ursacks are not permitted, but the Ursack company is currently in litigation with the federal government to try to make it legal for you to use an Ursack in places where bear canisters are required. And this is seen by people in the park service to be a really big deal and really bad for bears in the future. So I am not hating on Ursacks. I'm not here to tell you that they're not the move for you. In fact, I think there are some uses, especially on the Colorado Trail and some other places, where you might find them to be incredibly useful, even if not directly for bears. What I will say though is that if you have an Ursack, I would encourage you to still counterbalance that Ursack. I know this is kind of taking away some of the advantage of the Ursack, but for the good of bears and for the good of hikers in the future, I think this is the only responsible move until we know for sure how this sort of the bears interacting with the Ursacks will play out. So if you have an Ursack, that's great. I hope that you'll use it, but I hope that you'll consider counterbalance hanging it so that you can protect the bears and the wildlife in those different areas. Now this guy here, this is my bag. I've used this one on the not on the John Muir Trail. So this is a bag that I've used on a lot of different hikes. This is actually the bag I took on my Colorado Trail through hike in 2020. It's likely to be the bag I take in 2021, this year coming up. And I might actually consider just using a different lighter bag and still doing the counterbalanced hanging, that kind of thing. And I think this one works really nicely for a number of different reasons. Number one, it's really nice because it's waterproof. I can hang it as my food diminishes. So as I get further and further into my hike, farther and farther into my hike, I can actually squeeze this down. It packs much lighter and it's much smaller, so it can kind of fold down and compress if I need a bag for 3 days of food or 7 days of food. This one seems to be really the move. I like this one quite a bit. and I think many of you will find this to be more than sufficient. And I also like going with something that's waterproof, but I think you could probably get away without waterproof, especially if you put your food in day bags that have Ziploc bags that kind of keep them protected. I like to use gallon bags to plan out my days of the week, so that way I don't burn through all my snacks. I think this is a really good viable option for a lot of people, and I think you could do this less expensively. You could even consider doing something, if you're going to counterbalance, like an old pillowcase, probably would work fine, especially if you have it set up in that way. What I will say as well though is be very careful, because with this being 20 liters, this is half the size of my whole backpack I can fill up with this. So when I fill this up and then I try to counterbalance hang this bag, it's often the 550 cord that you'll find for hanging the bag, say at REI or in the outdoor section of like a Dick's Sporting Good. This is very hard to pull up if you have the bag full and you're trying to pull it with a little string. That can be really tricky. If that happens to you, just grab a stick off the ground, wrap your string around the stick, and then use that as a handle to pull it, and that makes it really easy and doable. But I do like this option as well. So this guy here, love them or hate them, they are here to stay. These are Bear canisters. This is my one of my 2 Bear canisters. This is by Bear Vault. They make 2 different sizes, and people either love or hate these. I think they have different uses for different times, and they can be really beneficial in a lot of surprising ways. One of the things that I like to tell people about this is that this is really guaranteed security for your food from rodents, and that's probably a greater concern for many of you depending on the hikes that you're doing, because rodents will get into your food bags when a bear might not be able to. For example, I was hiking on the Appalachian Trail maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and I counterbalanced my food, but a squirrel went down the string and got into my food bag and chewed a hole in my backpack, and so that was a real bummer from there. And I think that these do a really great job of making sure that your food survives the night. One other real advantage is that this gives you a flat surface, so you can either sit on this or you can put your food and cook on this if you have a jet boil or something of the sort. So if you do decide to take a Bear canister, that's pretty decent from there. I don't love that they're round, so they tend to sit really uncomfortably or weirdly in your backpack, especially if you have a frameless bag. But if you're going to use a Bear canister, what I do recommend is that you pick up one of the Bear Vault canisters. Don't buy one of the Garcias, one of the opaque ones. And the whole reason here is that when you put in your food for weeks and weeks, what am I talking about? For days and days, if you have your Snickers bar at the bottom that you want to reach, you can go in here and grab it right away, and you can see through it to see where those snacks are. In the other canisters, you can't see that, so you might end up emptying out your whole Bear canister just to get the one snack that you're really hungry for. So I like this one here. If you're interested in this one, I'll leave a link below. 2 different sizes. I think I can fit about 6 days of food in here. Remember also when you're planning your food storage that you need to keep your toothpaste and other toiletries with your food. These are good to have on stash, especially if you plan to do, say, a lot of different adventuring in the future. You can rent Bear canisters for shorter trips if you're deciding that you're going to go maybe do an overnighter in Yosemite or Sequoia where you have to have a Bear canister. You can rent them if you don't do a lot of hiking in those areas. But if you are planning to do, say, a through hike of some sort, these are good to have. They are a little bit heavy. They weigh about 2.5 pounds for this size, and then the other one is probably about 2 pounds. You don't save a lot by getting a smaller one. You just save that volume. But some of the things to know is that it's also, as you start packing down your Bear canister throughout the weeks, what I do recommend as well is that you start storing your pots and pans and other gear in here so you can shrink up the size and volume of your pack. So this is a really functional kind of number, but the disadvantages are many. Disadvantages being that you're gonna have to pack around it. This needs to be often the first thing in your bag. These also are heavy, but I personally like this one for a lot of new hikers to give them that peace of mind, because ultimately if you're waking up in the middle of the night and you're hearing every bump and creak in the night and you think your food's gonna be gone, that's gonna really interfere with your sleep, and your sleep is ultimately what's gonna determine your success on the trail. So having a good Bear canister can make a difference, especially for new hikers until you get comfortable. Now, what I'll also say about this is that in those high alpine elevations, you probably technically don't need a Bear canister for bears. Bears range typically stops at about 9,000 feet, I believe. We can double check that, but it stops below tree line. And so typically bears aren't gonna make their way up above tree line, but in some cases, like on the PCT or on the JMT, where people have been bad about food storage in the past, bears have gotten much more comfortable going into those higher elevations to get food, so having a Bear canister can really help for those scenarios as well. And then finally, a couple of things that you can do with this at the end of your hike or at the end of your through hike is you can actually mail the whole Bear canister. So say you're going out to the Colorado Trail and you're deciding that you're going to do your first resupply in Breckenridge, then maybe what you do is you take a small bag like the one I had here, maybe a ditty bag, and you put your food in that and counterbalance hang it for the first 4 or 5 days, so you can put in big miles and get to Breckenridge and you can send your first resupply in your Bear canister. That's a great idea for testing the waters, counterbalancing the food, and seeing how you feel about it. What's also worth knowing is that when you get used to the trail, what you learn is that the bear canister or bear protection or food storage, those are ultimately to protect the bears and to protect them from humans. That's really critical in the story here, because if bears become familiar with humans as a source of food, then they start moving into different areas and trying to find that food, and then the bears end up having to be put down. Generally speaking, if you do a good job with food storage, bears are not going to be any danger to you, and you're not going to be any danger to the bears. So I really highly encourage you find a method storing your food that's going to protect the bears for the future. They're really truly beautiful animals, and they're really cool. If we can protect them, I think that's going to go a long way. I hope that you find this information useful. If you do find it useful, I hope that you'll click like and subscribe. This community has already grown to 300 people in a short matter of a couple of months, so I'm really excited about that, and I'm grateful for all of you who have become a part of the Outside Comfort Zone community that way. If you do get a bear canister and you decide you want to put a little bling bling on it, hope you'll find me on Instagram at Backcountry Champion, and send me a message on Instagram and say, hey, Snack Box, I'm hoping that you'll send me one of those cool Outside Comfort Zone stickers to put on my new bear canister. I'd be happy to do so. And again, if you want one of those bear canisters, feel free to follow the link below, and it will help support the channel some. I think that would be a really cool thing, but you're not obligated, obviously. So I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. I hope you're looking ahead to a really tremendous summer of hiking. I'm super amped to be on the verge of taking off on the Colorado Trail and getting to meet many of you. Thank you all for your support, and I'm looking forward to talking to you soon. Take care, everybody. Snack Box out. You know what you call a bear canister that's broken? A bear canister. Get it? Sorry.